Welcome to APL 360. My name is Jamie. This video is part of my series on the APL 360 programming language. In this episode, I'm going to go through an MVT4APL tutorial that's found as a sample session in the MVT4APL user's guide. I'm going to start at the website for MVT4APL. To be able to follow along and to do the tutorial, you'll have to have a complete working installation of MVT4APL. I'm using Windows 10. And if you don't, you can go to the website and download the user's manual, which has complete installation instructions. It will tell you and explain what the different download options are. You'll want to, for a new system, you'll want to download either the small distribution or the large distribution, and that's explained in the documentation. If you don't have a working installation, I have made another video where I go through the complete installation process in that video if you want to check that out. So once your system is installed, then you'll want to bring up the documentation and then start the system. So I'm going to jump over to my MVT4APL folder, and you'll want to run apl360.bat, the batch file, to get the system started. I'll go ahead and start mine. And while it's getting started here, I'm going to jump over to the documentation real quick. So I'm going to start back at the beginning of the documentation. And this is what the front page looks like. I'm going to skip ahead to page 13 and talk about the Apl Keyboard. So you need to make sure that when you type in commands or characters that inside these terminal windows that have just opened up. So let me just get those repositioned here real quick. So you want to be sure to use the key map that's presented here on this sample Apl keyboard. Things are remapped from where you would normally find them, even for keys that are on the existing US keyboard, like the parentheses and brackets are in a different location, the asterisk, the question mark, the equal sign. So I'll be following this Apl key map. There are some pretty interesting information down below on the specific IBM 1052.7 terminal emulation. And we have to remember that when APL 360 came out, the standard mode of use then was on a teletype printer or a teletype system that had a paper printer connected to a keyboard, and that was the output mechanism. So we didn't have things like a full screen editor to be able to move up and down or left and right as we would normally expect on a modern LCD screen or CRT type terminal. And so the terminal emulation has to deal with things to be compatible with APL 360 as it had originally came out. And so I'll be demonstrating some of these things, like making mistakes and then backspacing and doing a line feed to make corrections and so on as I go through the tutorial here. But again, the documentation here explains why some of the behavior is different than what you might expect. So I'm going to skip ahead to page 20. And the sample session for this tutorial starts at the bottom and just explains there what's initially being created. Now, I have previously, when I did the installation, I signed in as the operator user, and I created 2 new users as is shown here in the documentation. So I've already done the add command for user 2132 and user 1798, so I won't repeat those here. But in one of the terminal windows, it doesn't matter which one, I'm going to log in as the terminal or as the operator user 314159. Then I'm going to get the attention. So in the recording terminal works by essentially being a read-only terminal, although it's not quite read-only, but um, it's acting as if it were read-only so that it can print out operator messages or messages to the console, essentially here. For me to input commands, I need to get the attention of this terminal with Control A, and that puts me 6 spaces forward. So I'm now in the standard kind of APL entry position. And I'm going to load the operator functions workspace, OPFNS. Then I'm going to set the current date. And I'm going to do, let's see, 03. Let's say that I make a mistake here. It's a good place to demonstrate making mistakes. So I put in a wrong date, for example, and I decide I need to go back and make a correction. So I backspace, and then, I'm not thinking I'm in APL or I'm in the terminal here, and I just decide to type over what I've previously typed. So I mean to type 0302, but it doesn't show that I put in the 02 there. I get X's, and that's the terminal telling me that it's not understood the character combinations. So it's tried to take the previous characters that were there, which were 1s, and combine them with the 0 and the 2 for each one of those to see if it can come up with another character that it knows about. There are APL characters that are valid in the language that are typed as overstriked characters of 2 existing characters from the keyboard. You type one, then you backspace, and then you type the other, and then the terminal will show you what that new character is. There are only a handful of those, so most of the combinations of characters you would try to retype over are not going to be recognized. And even if I go back and still try to make the correction now, it won't let me. And then I press enter, and then I get the character error message. You'll notice what happened though is that as I backspaced, APL has forgotten about those characters that I've essentially deleted, and it is in a position now for me to start typing in new characters. The problem is I cannot type them in on the same line like I was trying earlier. You have to imagine, again, being on a teletype where you have paper and you backspace, but now you want to start typing the rest of the line correctly. On a typewriter, you would be typing over existing characters, and you wouldn't, it just wouldn't make sense what you're seeing, even if the underlying system could recognize, oh, those are new characters that it's supposed to be working with. As you would see them on the paper, it would look like just a bunch of overstriked, possibly gobbledygook. So the way the mechanism worked is that you would backspace, but then you would line feed a new line of paper, and then you would type from there moving forward. So I'm going to demonstrate that here. I will do set date 03. Oh, there I made a mistake. I meant 03, but I typed 02, so it's a good time to backspace. So I backspace, and then again, back on page 13, you'll find out to get a line feed, you do Shift X. And then that's going to be shown here as a character that's representing a line feed. I move down to the new line, then I can start typing from where I backspace to, and then I can type the rest of the line correctly. So I want 03/02/21, and then a single quote. And then APL has recognized that as a complete valid command, set date, and then I have a date inside quotes. And I can check the date by doing Control A and typing in date, and I can see the current date there is set correctly. Okay, so once you've loaded the operator functions workspace and you've set the date, we can go ahead and hide the operator window here, or recording terminal, and we can bring up our next terminal to continue on with this walkthrough. So we're going to sign in as user 1798, and then we're going to do a few things with that user. So here in the documentation, although it's showing in the next steps here of signing in, as user 1798, then it goes back and shows you what will be displayed in the recording terminal as users log on. So I'm going to just move forward now to the next page. So start with user Rigi. We're going to display an array, then create and test a trivial times table function m and a describe variable, save the workspace under the name times tables, clear the workspace and check the library contents, and then sign off. So let me sign in, user 1798. Now I'm in APL mode here. You'll see that it displays APL 360. I'm going to show an array of the numbers 1 through 45, but reshaped into a 3 by 15 matrix. So we do 315. Reshape is the row character, Shift R, and then to get the numbers from 1 to 45, we're going to use iota, and then do a calculation to get 45. We're going to take 3 multiplied by 15 here, and then press enter or return. And so there is our 3 by 15 matrix. The next thing we're going to do is to define the m function for our multiplication timetable. So we're going to do a del character, which is Shift G, and our output variable is e, and we do left arrow. I'm going to pronounce that as gets, so e gets, and then the name of the function is m, and then it's taking one argument we're going to label as b. And then press enter. Now we're in the function definition editor, so you'll notice a line number 1 over to the left. So e gets, now we type in the calculation that we want, which will be the number b. So let's say it's the 5 times tables, then b will represent the number 5 in this case. So how do we get a 5 times table? Well, we need to do b times 1, and 5 times 1, 5 times 2, 5 times 3, and so on. So we want b times, and then we're going to do the numbers 1 through 10. So that's an iota 10, but we want it reshaped as a 2 by 5 matrix for the output. So we're going to do a 2, 5 reshape, which is row, and then iota 10. So that's the line of code that will do the calculation. Then we press enter. Now we're done with our definition, so we just do a del on a line by itself. Now we want to check to make sure that that works, so we test it with m of 7. And there's the 7 times tables from 1 through 10. Then we write a description and store it into a describe variable. This is kind of a common convention with APL, at least APL 360 workspaces. I don't know about modern APLs, whether they still do this or not, but I'm going to put describe gets, and then the description is welcome to times tables, comma, space, enter. Okay, I made a mistake there. Sometimes the easiest way to fix a mistake is if it's a short thing that you've typed, you can just press enter and then retype the whole thing from the beginning. So here I've typed in already quite a bit of number of characters, so I'm not going to just press enter and then start over. I'll backspace to the place I made the mistake, do Shift X, and then continue on. So enter m number, and then a single quote. I'm going to make sure that that looks okay. I'll type in describe. So it looks fine. Now we're going to save the workspace with the name times tables. So right paren save times tables. Not save. This workspace is clear workspace. Okay, I may have I kind of fat fingered a character inside there, so it just may not be recognizing this. So I'm going to try it again. Save times tables. Okay, I know what's happening. I've previously done this, and I have already previously created a times tables workspace for this particular user, and so it's not letting me save this, although the the error message here is not really clear. It's the first time that I've tried to do that, so that I've noticed that. So I'm going to save it with a new name instead of looking up the command. There is a command where you can drop an existing workspace, I believe, and then overwrite it. But I'm going to save it as times tables 2. Okay, so I'm getting that same message. What could be going on here? Let's see, do I have functions defined? I have variables defined. So I know my workspace is not clear. I know that it's not a clear one. So there's the description, M of 77, that still works. Let's see, let's try to save it again. So if I do lib, I have one. It's already called times tables. I know that. Let's see, maybe I need to name it. Let's try this. Save times table 2 without the extra characters at the end. Okay, so I don't know exactly what was happening there with the name. Maybe the name was too long when I tried to call it times tables 2, or somehow maybe it truncated my times tables 2 and just assumed I was writing times tables again because of the number of characters there. So this worked, saving it as times table with the 2 at the end instead of the E. So okay, learning process for us all there. I'm going to go ahead and clear the current workspace as the walkthrough shows us. Then I can type in write paren lib and see that I have 2 workspaces defined in my own personal library as this user. And then I'm going to sign off. So at this point, I want to continue, and they would have me log on as user Pilatus, which is user 2132. I can do that in the same terminal window, or I could go back to my MVT4APL folder and load another terminal window and just treat it as 2 separate sessions in 2 completely different terminal windows. That's one of the advantages of running APL 360 on an emulated mainframe, is that it does handle multiple logins. I'm logging in here locally, but I could also be logged in from a remote computer through using TCP/IP into this system as well, and have an APL session up and running it through that connection also. But to save time, I'm not going to load another terminal. I'm just going to log into this one as user 2132. Then I'm going to load from user 1798 that new times tables workspace. So load 1798. Now I can load the original one that I had defined in a previous session, or I can load the one that we just defined. Times table 2 should work just fine. So there it is. It's loaded. It tells me the date and time that this library or this workspace was saved that I'm loading now. So we'll see what it has defined. I'll see the variables that have been defined in it, describe, and then the functions. Then I'll type in describe to see the description. It tells me what to do. I'm going to do M of 77. And then I'm going to clear this workspace. Okay, so that was that sample walkthrough of logging in as another user and bringing in another function from, or a workspace from another user. Now, public workspaces have numbers that go from 0 up through, or maybe 1 up through 999. I'm not sure about 0. user numbers start above 1,000. So what we're going to do next is to load some things from the public libraries that are part of the MVT4APL distribution. So there's a description here and the documentation of what we're going to do. I'm going to load the news workspace from library 1, again, a public library. News has information about what's included in these public libraries, credits to where they came from, and so on. So we'll do describe, and it prints out a bunch of information. We could go ahead and explore this further at this time if we wanted to, but I'm going to continue on with what's given in the documentation. But you could certainly take a moment to type in some of these other variable names and commands and see some of the information here that's included. This is interesting historical information. I find that fascinating. These things that were written back in the 1960s are up and running and working just fine now in 2021. So then we can type library to see what public libraries come along with this distribution. And if I scroll up, you'll see it's kind of wrapped around a little bit. It's funny here, but there's library 1 with these workspaces, library 2 with these, library 3, 5, 6, 100, and then 999. And there's some more description here as well. So those are public libraries and workspaces. And then moving on into the sample walkthrough, we're going to load the plot format workspace. That's in library 1, load 1, plot format. And then run the plot command. And there is a very long APL command here in the documentation. And if you want some practice with your APL keyboarding skills, you could take some time to work through that. Doing something long like that, the first couple times is going to be really tedious, and you might find yourself having to do the line space and backspacing and line spacing and making corrections a lot. So it's not recommended. That line is included, though, in the MVT4APL folder, specifically in the documentation subfolder. So I will show you how to get to that in just a minute. But you'll notice, well, let me go ahead and grab it, and then I can show you here in this with this larger font what I'm talking about, with characters that you have to type using 2 keystrokes rather than 1. So I'm going to go back to my APL3 or my MVT4APL folder, go into the doc subfolder, and you'll see there is a text file here, plot format sample. I will open that up in Notepad. And here's the big long command. Now, the first time you do this, your font in Notepad is probably not going to be set to the APL font. So I'm going to reset mine here to, let's say, Courier New, which is the one of the default ones that comes with that Notepad may be installed with initially. Okay, so this is what the characters look like in a normal font. So it doesn't look like APL at all. It will once we switch to our APL font, though. So I'll go to Format, go to Font. I'm going to go back up to the APL 360i Semi and make sure it's italic there. And then I see recognizable APL characters here. So I'm going to copy this and then paste it into my APL terminal window. So I've done Control-C to copy, and then back here, if I just use my right mouse button and click, it performs the copy command for the terminal, something the terminal recognizes. And then when I press Enter, it should go ahead and do the plot of those 2 functions on the same chart here. So I find that's really cool. Let's look at that command a little bit more closely. So you'll notice that there are a couple characters here. I'll just put my cursor over the top of them. Here's one that is an O with a star in the middle. And then here's another one, an O with a backslash. And those are not on the Apl keyboard map that you'll see in the documentation, because those are overstruck characters. And so let me show you how to get those. Okay, so something happened in my going back and forth with my cursor keys that it didn't like there. But if I want to type in the O with the backslash, I just do, in this case, it is a Shift O for the big O. There's also a Shift J, which gives you a little O character that I'm just looking at my cheat sheet here. So the O that is part of the J, that you get with the J, is called, the glyph is called jot. So, and it's smaller than the O, and I'll show you that in just a second, how that's different than this. So the O with the backslash is a transpose command in APL. The character glyph itself has a name, just I believe it's just, let's see, is it O backslash or circle backslash? It's called circle backslash. So if I do the circle, and then I press the backspace, and then I do shift of the forward slash, which will give me a backslash. So that is a valid combination of two characters. And so instead of giving me an X of saying it doesn't recognize it, it is recognized, and it prints it out in the terminal as the O backslash character. If I want to do the O with the circle with the star, and that is the log function, I'll do an O and backspace, and then do Shift P to get the star, and then that will show me that combined character. So those won't be recognized on their own, so I'll just press enter there. Let me show you Shift J, which is the jot, and that is a smaller circle. So sometimes the combined characters might, let's see, are there any that are made with jot? Not that I see. Not that I see offhand. So in newer implementations of APL 360, not APL 360, of APL that came after the original APL 360. So there was APL SV, and then there was VS APL. There is a character that is made up of the jot and then the tac character, which is Shift B. So I don't know if that's recognized here, but I'm going to try it and see. Nope, so that's not recognized as part of APL 360. So I knew that I had seen some additional characters made with jot, but that they're not in this version. Okay, so at this point, I'm done with the walkthrough. I can go ahead and sign out of this terminal. And then I can go back to the recording terminal. And I can see at the bottom that it's been printing out the user activity with the user's logins and logouts there. And so when I'm done, I want to make sure that I shut down APL 360 using the shutdown command, so that it shuts down nicely and doesn't leave things in kind of a bad state. So I will do Control A and type in shutdown, and then I can go ahead and sign off. And then that should go ahead and go through the shutdown process that's that should start to show up back here in the console window. I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I appreciate you watching and hope that you will check out some of my other videos on APL 360.